Welcome to the Providence College Podcast. Subscribe to the show on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Google Play. If you like what you hear, please review and share with others. Email podcast@providence.edu with questions or comments. Go Friars!
Hello and welcome to the Providence College Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Chittum, and I'm joined as always by PC producer and videographer Chris Judge, class of 05. Here at the Providence College Podcast, it's our job to bring you interesting stories from in and around the Friar family. And today, we are fortunate to have Alanna Serviss here with us, class of 2018, and goalie for the women's hockey team. Alanna, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Oh, it's our pleasure. I know this is kind of a fun week for everybody. Last night was the All Sports Gala. So how was that?
It was really fun. It's always a good way to wrap up the end of everybody's seasons. See everybody dressed up out of their sports clothes, and all the seniors get awards, and it's always a good way to end.
Now, and obviously everyone in the room is very competitive. Everyone is a Division I athlete. So is there a little competition with like who got an award, or I want to get that award, or anything like that going on?
Not so much for the awards that they give out, because those are more individual accomplishments, personal seniors that they want to honor for their accomplishments throughout the year. But there is something that we do called Friar Cup. That's a competition in between all the sports teams. And it's pretty much your team's community service, how much they're involved in other athletics. And basically we have Friar Cup games. Each sport is a Friar Cup game. And you get, for how many of your team goes to another Friar Cup game, you get a point. So pretty much they tally all those up with a couple other things at the end of the year. And whatever sports team wins, they get, I believe it's $1,000 to do with what their team wants, I believe. And then they get dinner with Bob Driscoll. And then there's like a second place and third place team. And honestly, I think women's cross country wins every single year.
Is that right?
Every single year.
Oh, yeah. Funny. How did your team do this year?
We did not come in the top three.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. But it is you can tell when they're starting to announce it, everybody's kind of like, oh, who's going to get it? They're all kind of looking at each other. But that we know every year women's cross country gets it. They're just so involved in everything.
Oh, good for them.
Yeah.
Good for them. I imagine that. I'm surprised they even have enough energy to do that. And I think of I can look outside my window and see some of the workouts they do in the track. I'm sure that your workouts in Senate Arena are just as difficult, but I actually can see their workout, and I'm just sitting there like, oh my goodness.
The way I look at it is their sport is our like punishment. It's like what we can't stand doing the most is running, and that's their whole sport, and they love it. And kudos to them for doing it and being passionate about it. But I could never. Right.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And obviously, your sport, you're very good at it. We appreciate you being here at Providence College, and your team hadn't had quite a season this year. Maybe it didn't finish up quite as well as you would have liked, but overall, it seemed like you had a pretty successful season.
We did. It's been, since my freshman year, it's been it's black and white to what we used to be. My freshman year, I don't think we didn't win our first game until somewhere in November. And our season starts in September. So there's really no excuse for that. And this year, it was incredible. We had an incredible rookie class. We had one of our freshmen, Whitney Dove, was Rookie of the Year in Hockey East. She was all rookie team. We had an incredible, I think our rookies had the most amount of points out of, I think, all other rookie classes. Or if not the most, they were in the top. And our coach Duraney won his 100th win this year, or his 300th win, excuse me. Cass Carl's one of our seniors. She got her 100th point this year. She also got the Sportsmanship Award for Hockey East. It was just, this is stuff that never happened in the past years that I've been here. It was an incredible year.
So when you have such a talented group of newcomers come in, that obviously is, I'm sure, a welcome sight when you have that kind of influx of talent entering the program, but obviously can be a little difficult for some people if they see either their ice time decrease or their reps decrease. So how do you go about kind of bringing those women into the group, into the fold, and making sure that you're still a cohesive unit?
Yeah. Well, the thing about this freshman class that came in is they were so like eager to learn and eager to be a part of the team. And they were such great teammates coming in. They're all good friends. The majority of them are from Canada. And they kind of came in very talented. We all knew that. And they, right off the bat, the majority of them got a lot of ice time. And it was, instead of kind of us upperclassmen that maybe were getting some ice time taken away from us, instead of looking at it as like, oh man, not playing as much as them, we kind of had to look at the season as a whole and how much more we were doing as a team. And you can't blame the freshmen. They came in good. They're helping us do more than we've ever done. And you can't really be upset about that, because this is the ultimate goal. Whether I'm not playing as much as I am, maybe a freshman is, and she's doing better than I would have done, then that's what we really want in the end.
Well, I'll tell you, I think it takes a lot of self-awareness and kind of team unity to take that approach. So good for you, and obviously good for your team that a lot of people were able to have that kind of mental attitude, I guess, in a way of viewing their peers, viewing their teammates in that light. And you mentioned that a lot of them were from Canada. You, however, are not. You're from Chicago, right?
Yep, Chicago.
So did you play high school hockey? How did that work for you?
I played travel growing up, because high school hockey in Chicago is not big at all. It's a very big suburban sport, and I'm from the city. And specifically where I went to school is tiny. There's under 200 kids. And needless to say, I was the only one that played ice hockey, girl or boy. So
the only person, period, that played hockey?
Only person, period. Yep.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They thought I was nuts. Because I'm gone you're gone every single weekend in the winter time, and never got to go to, I think I went to one homecoming, but it's every weekend I was gone. But, so I played travel in high school, and then I ended up playing, like I said, Chicago doesn't have a lot of intercity hockey teams for the high school league. So what they did is they combined a bunch of the Chicago schools and made kind of like a jumble of a team under one of the high schools that was downtown. And we all played under their team name, Latin. And then we would play the suburban schools, which had all their own teams. And it was, the way I kind of look at it from like college, it would be like club. It was really fun for me, because my team wasn't the best, and I got like 60 shots a game. So, I mean, that's practice time that I couldn't get back, and it was awesome. But the majority of my time was spent with travel, and I played, I think I started playing travel when I was like a U10. So when I was like 10 years old. So I played for a very long time.
I can imagine. So how did hockey come to be kind of your favorite sport in an area where it obviously wasn't very popular? Yeah.
My brother, who is older than me, he was a goalie growing up. My sister didn't play hockey at first when we were all young, and I wanted to be like my brother. I wanted to be a goalie, and he was awesome. I looked up to him so much, and I was like, Mom, I want to be a goalie. Dad, I want to be a goalie. And goalie gear is expensive, and they were like, no, we can't have two goalies in the family. This is crazy. But they were like, oh, my dad's like, no, she'll grow into all your brother's gear. Like, don't worry about it. My brother was like 6'3". I didn't grow into a single thing that he owned. Not one thing. My mom's just like, but I
see you gritting your teeth here. Obviously, it's an audio broadcast. You're gritting your teeth and shaking your fists.
Yeah. Mom was not happy about that. But I mean, we played every sport growing up. Every sport under the sun. We went every single season. We were playing a sport. Hockey was just something that I excelled at. I don't know. There's something in me that I just loved hockey more than anything else. And I just kind of took it and ran with it. And it's a lot of, like I said, there are a lot more rinks in Chicago than there were when I was growing up. One of my first travel teams, we used to play at this rink in this town called Orland Park, and it was a good hour and a half away from my house. And that's 3 days a week, driving there and back. Practices are late. Like, sometimes we wouldn't start until like 9, and wow. I've got to get back. We're on the ice for an hour and a half. I got to get back home. It's a lot of late nights with a flashlight in the car doing homework on the way to the rink, because the rinks were just so far away.
As a native Rhode Islander, I cannot relate to that kind of travel distance between places. Wow, I can't even imagine that. That is pretty wild. And I want to keep going through kind of your timeline of kind of hockey success. I think it really is an interesting story.
Yeah.
But before we get there, this past year on January 21st was kind of a hallmark moment in the season for you and for the team. Can you explain what that was?
The game?
Yeah.
Well, basically what had happened is every year we have a pink out game, or breast cancer game. All of Hockey East does it. All the teams here do it. And I kind of had this idea last year. I was doing it was an argumentative paper. I was doing some paper for an intensive writing class, and it was about mental illness in athletes and college athletes. I don't know how I came about this topic. I must have been searching for something, but as I was doing this paper, I kind of realized this trend and this kind of silent epidemic that I knew a lot about that I wanted to kind of look more into. So after doing this paper, I kind of realized that mental illness in college athletes is kind of a problem. And I kind of had the idea that I was like, well, what if we do kind of a game for it? If we do something like we do for the breast cancer games. So at the end of last year, I went to my coach's office and I kind of brought him the idea. I was like, hey, I've been doing this paper. I've got this idea. What if we did a charity game for mental health awareness? He was like, wow, that's really interesting. Like, nobody's ever really, we've never really done anything like that before here. He's like, but if you want to do it, like, you can take the reins, run with it, do whatever you want. Like, but he's like, you're going to be the one that's doing it. It's on you. And it was. I said, I had an internship here this summer, and a lot of my lunch break, I would look up what mental health places were around Providence that we could possibly work with. I sent a lot of emails to a lot of people, just to kind of feel out who wanted to help, and ended up connecting with the Providence Center, and went and met the CMO on one of my lunch breaks at work and spent an hour and a half talking to her, and it was just incredible. And we did a mental health awareness game, and we raised money for them. We raised about $1,000 that we got to donate to them. And it was incredible. It was the first mental health awareness game that I believe the school has done in any sport. It went so much better than I had thought. It was just like something that I had thought of last year, and I didn't know how well it would go. I didn't know if my teammates would kind of take it and run with it, would want to help promote it as much as I did. Not everybody's as passionate about it as I am. And it gets annoying when you keep trying, when somebody loves something and you don't love it as much, and you're just like shoving it down their throat. So it was a lot of me convincing my teammates, like, hey guys, like, share with all your family and friends. Like, I know this is annoying, but it's really beneficial.
Right.
And they did. I couldn't have asked for a better team or staff to help me out with it. They were incredibly supportive, and we can't wait to do it next year.
So why was this such a passion project for you?
I have struggled with mental illness for as long as I can remember. When I believe it was the year after I graduated high school. Yeah, because after I graduated high school, I took 2 gap years before I went away to school. So I was still playing travel hockey. I went to just a college near my house, took a couple classes, and I had realized that I was just really, really struggling. I was sad a lot of the time. I was really unmotivated. I did a lot of laying around. I would go. My parents would drop me off at school. I just wouldn't go to class. I would go to the building. I just wouldn't go to class. I didn't want to be there. And my mom, she wanted to strangle me because she thought I was just being lazy and annoying, and I don't blame her. I was a pain. We kind of had a little breakthrough where, like, well, maybe this is more of a problem than me just being a lazy 19-year-old. So we went to a neuropsychologist and did a lot of testing, and she ended up diagnosing me with ADHD, mild depression, and anxiety as well. And it's from there, I was just kind of like, all right, what can I do with this? How can this help me? I didn't really want to take any meds. I didn't really want to kind of have it define me. So it took a while for me to kind of understand that this is just something that I have to deal with. It isn't the only thing that I am. It doesn't just define who I am. It doesn't have to change how I live my life, how I act, how I speak, how I talk. So it took a while for me to kind of come full circle and be like, great, well, this is just something I have to do. It's something I have to deal with. I did a lot of research. I've had a lot of wonderful psychologists and sports psychologists that have worked with me. And they, by the time I got to Providence, it was something that I had really felt that I had under control, under my own belt, and that I was comfortable talking about. And I had no problem dealing with it. I haven't had many issues since I've been here. And it's been really great to kind of see where I came from in the beginning, from getting this diagnosis and kind of feeling like, oh my God, like what does this mean? I don't want to be one of those people, like those sad people in those commercials. And
right.
It's, you don't know how to deal with it until it's kind of thrown on you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's such a huge thing, is how you deal with it. Where I could have went up from there, I could have went down from there. And I'm really glad I went the path that I did.
So going back to kind of high school and then your 2 gap years, you talked earlier about how, you take these, crazy long drives to ice rinks here, there, and everywhere. And then, these long nights back where you're reading in the car. Obviously at that point, it seems as though you were, you had your life was in a spot where you were, and excuse me if I'm using the wrong terminology here, but you were able to, you had a lot of energy. You were very, goal oriented with your hockey and your schoolwork. You mentioned you have your flashlight, you're reading in the car on the way home. And then you, as you mentioned, a couple of years later, you're at the point where you don't want to do anything. You feel like you have no energy and you're not really moving towards a certain, I guess you're not as goal oriented. That's not the right way of putting it, but you're not really as, you're not moving in the same direction as you were before. So was that kind of a slow movement from one extreme to the other, or did it kind of happen quickly?
No, I'd say it was kind of a slow movement because, as I said, in high school, it was high school and then it was whatever sport I was playing practice, and then it was going to hockey later, and my life was very structured and everything was done at a certain time. Mm-hmm. But once I had graduated and I was only going to school part-time, and then we would practice maybe 3 times a week. So I'd have 1 or 2 classes a week and then practice, but the rest of the time I wasn't doing much. And it was kind of then when I had a lot of free time that I kind of sunk into a depression. And I felt kind of worthless for all my friends going away to school, and they were all having a fun freshman year away at their dorms and in their fraternities and sororities. And all my other teammates were away playing their first year of college hockey. And I was just kind of the girl that stayed home because she couldn't go away her first year. And it was a lot of just self-loathing, being like, why wasn't I good enough to go away the first year? Why all my other friends are doing this? Why couldn't I? So it was in high school, I definitely had some sad bouts, but it was nothing really compared to how much I realized it after I graduated, solely because I just had so much time. And instead of being motivated to maybe train more or find a job or do something else with all my free time, I really didn't utilize it at all. And that's when I kind of noticed the most was then.
So was it a vicious cycle too? You mentioned the self-loathing of all right, you have that you have a kind of self-loathing feeling, and then that kind of causes you kind of deeper into the depression and not doing the things that you aspire to do, which would then create more self-loathing.
Yeah. And then there's the self-loathing that, why am I not doing anything? I'm worthless. And then you kind of sink into a depression, but then you kind of start, where the anxiety plays in, as you start now I'm not doing anything. Why aren't I should be doing things. But then you're so low and you're sunk in such a dark place that you're very, I would get very anxious about all the things I could be doing, but I had no motivation to do them. Mm-hmm. So it was a lot of knots in your stomach. Why can't I do this? Why aren't I doing all these things I need to do? And I knew that I need to do them, but physically I couldn't I couldn't motivate myself to do the things that were making me anxious.
So what was there a kind of a moment in time where you were able to then address it? Was there some sort of external factor that kind of jostled you out of that, or was it more of a self-realization that brought you to that point? Or what caused you to go from that feeling, that place in your life, to then getting the help that kind of brought you to Providence College, I guess? Well,
I think it was definitely, as I said, going to get tested, kind of acknowledging that this is something I have. I'm not just a lazy teenager. It was something that that was a little bit out of my own control. And then going to see psychologists and sports psychologists and kind of getting them to explain to me what's going on in my brain and why this is happening, just so I could kind of get a handle on it on my own. And once I really started to understand why things were happening, it was a lot easier for me to be okay, well, then this is where I could go from here. It was more of accepting that this is who I am and this is just something I have to deal with. That kind of helped me get out of it, instead of just being well, this sucks. I have to deal with this. Nobody else has to deal with this. It was just accepting it and be great, well, this is it. I got to do something with it. Can't sink this low forever. I'm not going to get anywhere. So.
Right. So the ADHD, the anxiety, and the depression, are they interrelated, or do they kind of act separately on you from, compared to one another?
The depression and anxiety are definitely interrelated. They're, like you said, they're a vicious cycle. It's you're low and then you get anxious about what you're not doing because you're low, and then you get low again. And it's a cycle and cycle and cycle. The ADHD I've kind of known about my whole life. My mom is very ADHD as well. We have very similar brains, and she never really wanted to put me on medication as a kid just because I had never gotten tested for it, but we could just tell by how similar her and I both were. So we had never really pursued any kind of testing or medication or anything like that. So I don't think that plays into the depression and anxiety as much, but the two of them, the depression and anxiety, are definitely connected. Got
it. So once you kind of got the help that you were looking for and you got to be in a good place, why did you end up choosing Providence College? I mean, you kind of went halfway across the country from where you were currently living. So why was that kind of the best choice for you?
Well, when we called it post-grading, taking the 2 gap years, I was looking for a school to play at. I didn't really have a ton of options of where I was getting recruited from. Division I wise, I was getting recruited by a lot of Division IIIs. But at that point, I felt I had put so much effort into my hockey career that I needed to go D1. And I felt I deserved it. So I'd ended up getting recruited by Providence. I want to say at the beginning of the year before my freshman year. Something like that. And I'd kind of talked to them a bit, and one of the assistant coaches, who is no longer here, she's the head coach at St. Norbert's now, Mare, she came to visit me in Chicago, and she came to see like a training session that I had with one of my goalie coaches. She met my parents, and from there I visited the school, and I was like, well, I love it. I want to be here for the next 4 years, and I'm so glad I did.
There you go. And you mentioned that during your time here at PC that you've been able to keep, I guess, and please correct me if I'm using the wrong language here, because I know a lot of that's very important too, in terms of erasing the stigma that you talk about these things in the right way. So you mentioned before that you haven't had any major issues since you've been at Providence College, be able to keep the anxiety, the depression, the ADHD under control. So what are the key factors in making sure that that's the case?
A lot of it is, for me personally, is that I kind of know what'll set me off. I understand my own triggers. And I kind of know how to deal with them when they arise. And luckily we have a sports psychologist on our hockey staff. There's a sports psychologist in the athletic department that everybody works with if they want to. What is his name? I forgot his name now. That's not good. But my freshman year, we worked with him a lot. And then we had a man named Wally Beasdell, who works with the men's team and our team exclusively, start working with us more. And knowing that I kind of had those resources if anything were to happen, if I was feeling any kind of way that I knew would kind of set me off, or if I knew I was going to experience any triggers or anything, knowing that they were a text away or a phone call away, or in the case of the one that was at he's just in our training room, I think like once a week I could go there and go and talk to him. So knowing specifically like what works for me, I think helped me so much being here and having so much success in not really having any huge episodes or anything.
Right. So kind of having the support available to you, yet at the same time being able to be proactive, knowing a lot about yourself and being able to kind of take advantage of that, kind of those two things in concert with it.
Yeah.
And then Dr. Sullivan, is that the name?
Dr. Sullivan,
okay.
Yes.
Just want to make sure. And thank you, first of all, thank you for sharing all of this.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is a very intimate look into what's going on in your head and things that you've, dealt with, over the past, 5 to 10 years. So we really do appreciate it. And especially when you talk about it from an athlete's perspective, and not even in a macho way, but, for athletes, being tough is important. It's not hyperbole. It obviously is very important. Having grit, being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Isn't a good way of putting it, I think, for a lot of people, especially if you're going through a hard practice day or you're having, you're in the third period, if you're playing hockey, or if, any other sport has its, same, the same issues of, all right, it's the end of a game, it's the end of a practice, fighting through discomfort, and all of those sorts of things. So when you have that end of the spectrum, and then the other end of the spectrum of being able to kind of open up about weaknesses that you have, whether it's mental, physical, or emotional, do you feel like that's a major hurdle for people who are athletes who might be suffering from this sort of thing?
Absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest reasons why I kind of found that mental illness was such a problem with college athletes. Not that they experience it any more than a regular student does, solely because they're so reluctant to talk about it, so reluctant to kind of accept that it's something that they've experienced, that admitting that sometimes they're sad, sometimes they get anxious before a game, or sometimes they feel like something's off, but they don't want to tell anybody because, my coach is going to think that I'm weak. He's not going to play me if there's something wrong that's not physical. You could go to your trainer and get your ankle taped, you're good for the game, but it's not really the same case when it's something with your brain and it's something inside of you that, especially if you're reluctant to talk about it, if you think you're going to be penalized for how you're feeling, that keeps the majority of the athletes that I've seen and that I know personally, keeps them from kind of speaking up and getting themselves help. And it makes it worse. It's a cycle. You're feeling these bad feelings, and then you won't talk about it because you think it's gonna hinder how your coach looks at you, how your team looks at you. And then that makes you feel worse because then you think you're even weaker. You think that, well, why can't I control this? It's if it was a sprained ankle, I could rehab it and I could be fine. But it's a lot different when it's something coming from inside that you can't see.
Right. And, you're on the student advisory athletic committee, and there's a lot of things going on with that over the next 12 months. I was speaking with Jen Cunningham earlier. I know as an advisor to the group, and she was telling me some of the things, and I'd love to talk to you about those in a second. But before we get there, when you are talking with one of your peers, or if you were to talk to one of your peers here at PC, or an athlete on any team at any level, and they think that they might be, that they might have something, a mental illness or something else that could be addressed, or they might want help, but they're not sure how to bring it up or who to talk to, how would you advise them, or how would you talk to them about this?
I would say absolutely the psychologists that we have on staff. Number one, if they're not as comfortable with them, most people are more comfortable with their specific athletic trainers. Ours is Michelle Zielinski, and I would advise them to kind of talk to somebody they are comfortable talking with, because it's not, especially even in a situation like this, going to someone you don't really know. Like if someone unlike me who hasn't really talked to Dr. Sullivan or Dr. Wally Bizdell and just wants to go up to them and be like, hey, I'm sad, I don't know why. It's not a very comfortable environment for them. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't really promote a lot of sharing their feelings, which is what kind of the goal is here. So definitely going to a coach if they're that confident in them, if they're that trusting in them and talking to them about how they feel, or a teammate who's kind of experienced the same thing. Like you said, I would hope my teammates would come to me and talk to me about it. And then from there, I would go to a trainer or to Dr. Wally or to Dr. Sullivan and have a professional, deal with it.
Right. And I know PC is not unique in that regard in terms of the mental health professionals that work on campus. Certainly there are high schools and colleges that may not have sports psychologists on staff, but counseling centers at colleges around the country are available. And at a lot of high schools, you have part-time counselors that will be there as well. So obviously that can be very helpful. And for you, have you felt like opening up about this has positively affected your athletic ability, negatively affected it, or had kind of no impact on it?
I don't think it's had any impact on my athletic ability, partially because from the time that I've been here at Providence, I've been so open about talking about my own struggles. And I'm kind of a brute, for everyone that knows me, I'm a brutally honest person, and I don't keep much to myself. But with this, it's really helped me because I'm very open and talking about my own struggles, and hoping that, that it would encourage other people to be more open and trusting about it with me and with their teammates and with other people. and to see that it doesn't hinder their athletic ability at all. Just, if anything, it'll help them, because it's just another hurdle that they need to get over, and find a way to help themselves with, and you won't struggle with it as much, and hopefully help your athletic ability.
Right. And the reason I bring that up is because I can see an athlete thinking, all right, if I admit to this, is that going to be like a slippery slope where all of a sudden I'm showing weakness more often? I might not have the same grit or toughness that I'm known for, that I need to have. But you're saying that's not necessarily something that should hinder somebody from opening up. Right.
And that's something I've definitely seen in athletics, and it's something I personally am trying to change. We're trying to do, next year, we want to kind of do a workshop with all the staff and the coaches. It's like I say, guy coaches do sensitivity training. Something kind of similar to that, where they would talk about, a professional would come and talk to them about triggers for certain athletes that are dealing with this, or even athletes that don't have a specific mental illness, but still kind of experience these struggles, which a lot of people do, a lot of athletes do. What to do in those cases, how to deal with those athletes, how not to treat them any differently, how to make them feel comfortable talking and sharing, and just feeling comfortable in what their own hinders mental illnesses are. And so kind of like a workshop to just discuss that. And so it's more of an open floor for them to talk about it and them to really understand what they're dealing with, rather than coaches just being like, oh, I've got an athlete that has a mental illness, the psychologist will deal with them. It's got to be, everyone has to kind of work towards it. Everybody's got to be on the same page about it, or it really doesn't benefit everyone.
Right, and I can see that being in a college environment could amplify some of these effects, especially for an athlete. And you can read stats, all day long about how in the current climate that college students, not just college athletes, just college students generally speaking, the anxiety levels compared to 10 to 15 years ago have increased, and that there's a lot of stress involved with that, if for no other reason that, you want to make sure they have a job when they graduate. And it's a huge, it can be a huge financial burden on them and their families. They want to make sure it's worth it, and all of those things. But when you put athletics in the mix too, then all of a sudden you're juggling the social side of college, the academic side, and the athletic side. And as we were talking about before we started recording, that just managing those things, all of them at the same time can be borderline impossible. And that's not even counting, kind of the postgraduate college search.
Right. And that's such a huge factor in just anxiety in general, is just the amount of, like you said, college students, there's so much on our minds all the time. And especially when athletics are in the mix, and it's normal to want to talk about these things. It doesn't matter who you're talking to, but bottling all that stuff inside, it's bound to explode at some point. You got to vent at some point. You got to let these things out. You got to say, hey, I'm stressed out. Hey, coach, I'm sorry. Like, I'm really stressed. I've got a huge final this week, or, just school has been stressful. Like, I'm sorry if I'm not performing to my potential, but, I'm really stressed at school, or, just stuff like that. Just making it okay you got to get this stuff off your chest at some point.
Right. And I think it's easy for fans to miss the point where, each athlete is their own person. They're individual. They're not a robot. That there are non-athletic reasons why people's athletics can suffer.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not just about the other team's defense, or, this other team set a great screen and then they scored. There can be other inhibiting factors as well. So you mentioned next year you're also going to be trying to do the fundraising game again. What else is kind of on tap for this topic in the next year for you, for the student athlete advisory committee, your team?
Well, like you said, with SAC, this was kind of a big initiative this year, which I actually didn't know it last year when I had proposed this to my coach that I wanted to do this game. It was at the first meeting of SAC from this year, that they were like, oh, one of our big initiatives, and it was an all Big East and Hockey East initiative. It was conference wide, that mental health really needed to be kind of addressed this year. And I was like, oh my gosh, how did they know? This is incredible. So I know they've got a conference over the summer that they're going to talk about mental health and kind of what they want to do moving forward. And I know for us specifically, we've talked about the game and how we're going to make just the fundraising sense better. And the thing for our game was it's not so much about raising money for them. As awesome as it is to donate money to them, it's more about raising awareness and kind of creating an environment where athletes feel comfortable. So it's a lot more that I want to kind of change the environment of the athletic department. Not so much just donating money to a cause and saying like, all right, thank you, we'll see you again next year. So like I said, we want to do that workshop with the coaches. I also would like to do something with the athletes, whether it's all the athletes at once or just a couple teams at a time or just one team at a time, talking to them about similar things and being like, hey, this is something that most of you are going to experience. And here's what you do if this happens. Here's what you do if you see a teammate struggling. And this is how you approach it. This is what to do if you feel this way. And it's okay that you do. And it's normal. And there's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't make you any less of an athlete. It doesn't make you any less of a person. It doesn't make you weaker. I think it makes you stronger to be able to admit that this is something that, be like, hey, there's something in me that's a little off. I'm not sure how to deal with it. There's people who are professionals in this. There are doctors that have degrees in this that can help me deal with something that I can't do all alone. And there's nothing wrong with that. So definitely trying to change the atmosphere in all sports, hopefully everywhere. And hopefully this is a thing that, like I said, Big East and Hockey East are both picking up. I'm not fully sure on their plans for the following year. They'll probably talk more about it at the conference over the summer, and then we'll find about it next year.
Well, thank you for everything. We appreciate you opening up and telling your story, not only in this, in this way on the podcast, but before this, with everything you've done around campus. And we certainly look forward to everything you're going to be doing in the future. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.